Is there any faster way to get shulker shells than a portal-based shulker shell farm? Well, two portal-based shulker farms, of course. But is there anything faster than two portal-based shulker farms? Yeah. Now, some of you may remember this design from my last video, where I showed off this farm amongst some other shulker bits and bobs. But this thing has been tuned and tweaked, and now it produces over 1,150 shells an hour. That's not just faster than your average single-cell portal-based shulker farm, but it's more than twice as fast. Not only is this farm a great alternative where using portals isn't possible, for example in the end, or on servers with different portal functionality, but it's a cheap, simple, and blisteringly fast shulker farm in general. Now, if you know anything about shulker farming, you might be thinking, wait a minute, but I thought that portals were the fastest way to farm shulkers. And you'd be right. So, how do I make a one-dimensional shulker farm go so much faster than a portal-based farm? Well, this farm cheats. I'll explain exactly how it does that in a bit. But first, I need to go over some of the basics of shulker farming. If you've already watched my previous videos, a lot of these next sections will already be familiar with to you, so feel free to skip ahead. I'll include some timestamps in the description. Shulker farming is based off of a mechanic added in 1.17, which introduced a chance for a shulker to duplicate if it's hit by a shulker bullet. There are a number of factors that affect if the shulker will duplicate or not. Firstly, the shulker needs to be opening its shell. Closed shulkers will have no chance to duplicate when hit by a shulker bullet and will just take damage. Secondly, other shulkers in an 8-block range of the shulker will induce the possibility of the shulker teleporting away without duplicating. This is an extra 20% probability for each shulker in range. Thirdly, shulkers below 50% health have a 25% chance of teleporting without duplicating whenever they take damage, including when hit by a shulker bullet. Finally, a shulker can only duplicate if it successfully teleports to a new location, in which case it will leave a new shulker at its previous location. Each time the shulker tries to teleport, it selects 5 random locations in a 17 by 17 by 17 region around itself, and checks if any of those blocks are valid blocks for it to sit on. If it finds a valid location, it will teleport to that location, but otherwise the teleportation will fail. Most shulker farms work by having a single shulker in a breeding cell at the centre of the farm. Snow golems are then used to aggro the shulker and force it to shoot. The breeding cell constrains the bullets so that they hit the shulker and cause it to try and duplicate. The region around the breeding cell is then filled in with some sort of shulker collection system, which has to perform 2 functions. Firstly, it needs to provide a large number of teleportable spots to maximise the chance of the shulker managing to teleport. But, perhaps more importantly, it also needs to collect the teleported shulkers, remove them from the area, and transport them to a killing chamber. This is important not just to get shulkers to a dedicated grinder, but also to remove them from the 8-block radius around the breeding shulker as quickly as possible. Portals are a particularly effective system for shulker collection, as not only do they remove shulkers almost instantly, but they also allow for a huge number of teleportable spaces, with every other block within the farm being a potential teleport space for the shulker. An alternative to using portals is scaffolding. Scaffolding has the unique property that its collision box changes depending on each entity's position. This means that shulkers can seem some spots as valid spaces initially, but invalid after they teleport to them. This can be used to force shulkers to continually teleport upwards, making it easy to quickly remove shulker pools from a region around the breeding shulker. However, a big downside to scaffolding is it can only be used for spaces above the shulker, meaning that only about 1 in 4 blocks in the teleport range can be made teleportable. Hopefully you now have a bit of an idea about how shulker farming works, and the rest of this video will make a bit more sense to you. I also have some other videos doing some deep dives into various aspects of shulker farming, so if you want to learn a bit more about how all the shulker mechanics work, I highly recommend checking them out. And don't forget to like, share and to Given that portals offer close to the ideal situation, both in terms of teleportable spaces and how quickly shulkers get removed, how come a scaffolding-based farm, which is much less efficient in terms of teleportable spaces, can be so much faster? Well, if you think about it, the ultimate limiting factor of a shulker farm is how frequently a shulker hits itself. If we can get the shulker to be hit more often, it will duplicate more often, and we'll get more shulkers. So, how do we get a shulker to hit itself more often? We don't. We break the rules and get other shulkers to hit it instead. The way we do this is with one of these, which I like to call a shulker supercharger. These extra shulkers continuously fire bullets at the golem in the cell, making a sort of bullet stream. By placing the breeding shulker in the bullet stream, it gets continually hit by the incoming bullets as soon as it opens, substantially increasing how quickly it attempts to duplicate. The way I like to think of this is that we're effectively getting farms for all of these 8 shulkers for free, without having to build any additional cells. In fact, while I showed off the supercharger in my initial video, it turns out I wasn't the first person to have the idea. Super Saiyan Subtlety showed off a prototype supercharged filter-based farm on BoardConf Discord all the way back in August. So, what's the disadvantage of using a supercharger? Well, not much, but there are 2 main issues we have to contend with. The first of these is scalability. While you can certainly tile supercharged designs, the addition of the supercharger does make this much harder. Additionally, more bullets and more shulkers also means more lag. This isn't something you're going to notice for a single cell, but for mega-scale farms, every additional bit of lag counts. The second issue is that you have to get the shulkers into position into the supercharger, adding to the complexity of the farm. This farm sidesteps that issue by having the shulkers teleport into the supercharger by themselves, meaning the supercharger can be filled just by running the farm. This leads to the second question, which I'm sure many of you have, which is, why don't I just supercharge a portal-based farm? And you're right, that absolutely would be faster. A lot faster. However, with the current generation of farm, the limiting factor is ultimately how fast you can aggro the breeding shulker, meaning that, without using any other special tricks, the benefits of switching to portal is not as big as it would be for non-supercharged variation. Using a single dimension farm also makes stocking up the supercharger easy, as we can rely on shulkers teleporting into the supercharger directly. There are also a lot of additional considerations that portal designs bring, which can be avoided with a single dimension farm. But that ultimately comes down to whatever your particular use case is, and also whatever your personal preferences are. Hopefully you now understand the concept. So, now to go over the details of the farm, including the major changes from the previous iteration. The farm was specifically designed to be optimised for supercharging. One thing that has to be taken into account when supercharging is that shulkers will only duplicate when open, so you want to avoid bullets hitting the shulker while it's closed as much as possible. An easy way to do this is by having the shulker offset from the path of the bullet, so that when it opens its shell, it intrudes into the path of the bullet. Originally, I also used this trapdoor as a gating mechanism, powered by this pressure plate which activates when the shulker fully opens. This works as shulker bullets are repelled by anything with a solid top surface. However, testing this farm, the slowdown in rates due to having to wait for the shulker to fully open outweighed any benefits that were gained by preventing the shulker from being hit while it was closed. The cell is also designed so that the bullets from the shulker in the breeding cell are added to the bullet stream. While this has very little impact on the farm while it's running at full capacity, it's very useful for starting the farm from a cold start, and means we can get everything up and running with just a single shulker. To detect when the breeding shulker dies, or teleports out, the pressure plate is hooked up to a decay clock. While shulkers are in the cell, the pressure plate is periodically reset every time a shulker opens its shell. To avoid false positives, a long decay clock is needed, as often the shulker duplicates before it ever manages to fully open. When the system detects that a shulker dies, a minecart is dispensed at the bottom of this farm, which travels up this water stream to collect one of the shulkers in the holding cell at the top here. To cut down on restocking time, I added a pre-collection system to the farm, containing a pre-collected shulker at the top here. Each time the farm restocks, this fence gate opens, allowing the held shulker to fall down, which is then replaced by a minecart coming out the water stream. Unfortunately, due to a bug, which we'll go over in a bit, the holding cell has to be outside of the shulker social aggro range, which prevents us from doing super fast restocking. Another change from previous design is the pattern of the scaffolding floors. While speaking with Dark about his shulker farm design, by the way, check it out, it's a great design, Dark pointed out that shulkers can't teleport to unsupported scaffolding, like this, from one block below, meaning that only 3 of the 4 possible spawn floors were valid for the breeding shulker. Fortunately, by using 2 layers instead of 1 for the bottom layer, we can still fit 4 layers into the teleporter region of the breeding shulker. Phew! Surprisingly, this change doesn't make a huge difference to the rates of the farm, but it will get around 100 extra shells per hour for the price of just 4 stacks of scaffolding, which is probably a worthwhile trade-off for most cases. As well as changing the layout, the size of the scaffolding platform has also been extended by a few blocks in each direction, as suggested by one of the commenters on my videos. While this doesn't increase the number of teleporter spaces for the breeding shulker, it does increase how quickly shulkers will leave the region around the breeding shulker, which reduces the chance that a shulker will fail to duplicate due to another shulker still being within the range. This change is a bit more questionable, as it increases the block count of the farm by almost 50%, for only about 100 extra shells per hour. On the other hand, scaffolding and half slabs are usually very easy to come by, so this is still going to be worth it in many cases. Aggroing shulkers to get them to open their shells as quickly as possible is critical to the rates of the farm, as this increases how quickly each shulker will duplicate, and also reduces the number of times shulkers get hit while closed. To speed this up, I use this trick suggested by Viphre, where an endermite is placed above the shulker for the golems to shoot at. Snow golems aim a fixed distance below the eye level of their target, so they miss the endermite and hit the shulker below. By having the golems fire at the endermite instead of the shulker, this means that the golems don't spend time retargeting every time the shulker teleports away. However, unfortunately there is a bug, where aggroed shulkers that are moved, either by minecart or by piston, will close their shells, but continue firing. This makes the shulker effectively useless for the purposes of shulker farming, as it will never attempt to duplicate and will clog up the system until it's moved out of range of the golems, or if it dies. Cubic Meter talks about these in his Shulker Mega Farm video, where he calls them trash muppets. Well, personally I like to refer to them as In fact, this is just one of multiple different trash muppet bugs. Crazily enough, every time a shulker duplicates, it becomes a trash muppet. Since shulkers are pushed into the breeding chamber in this farm, if a shulker gets hit before it is pushed, it will become a trash muppet. To avoid this, whenever the shulker in the breeding chamber is replaced, we temporarily block the line of sight of the golem to prevent the shulker from being hit before it is fully in the breeding cell. With the farm running at full capacity, we need to kill about 2,300 shulkers every hour, or about 1 shulker every 1.5 seconds. While the River Rose based grinder can keep up by expanding from 10 roses to 15, I wanted to look into alternative designs for those who don't have access to River Roses. This design, from ENX04, uses boats to pick up shulkers and suffocate them in blocks. However, it takes a while for shulkers to suffocate, so one of these modules is not enough to keep up with the rates of the farm. However, I saw this alternative design posted by Inverted on the SciCraft Discord. Again, it uses boats to pick up shulkers. However, this time it uses empty cramming using minecarts to quickly kill shulkers. This design is significantly faster than Ian's, and one of these modules can keep up with the entire farm. However, since it uses empty cramming, it does cause a fair bit of additional lag. To collect the drops from the farm, I like to use a dropper attached to a clock to drop the items down to a collection system at the base of the farm. However, you should feel free to use whatever collection system suits your needs best. So there you have it. The finished farm. Well, for now at least. There's a lot more that can be done with scaffolding-based shulker farms. Indeed, this design, from Malgay, is already faster than my design. And this prototype I put together based on some new discoveries by Dark, which, hopefully, he will show off relatively soon, is almost twice as fast. However, I think this farm represents a happy medium between optimizing for rates and other important considerations, like buildability. Once again, I find myself at the end of the video with so much I still haven't covered. However, I have a number of other videos lined up in the near future, including a look at the massive shulker farm on the Titancraft server, so stay tuned for those. Also, check out some of the recent videos from some of my fellow members on the NoobTech SMP server. Anyway, that's all from me for now, so until next time, bye bye.